Were you surprised by the number of photos of Bill Clinton in the Epstein Files? And can you commit to their
By
full?
what?
And were you surprised by the number of photos of Bill Clinton in the Epstein Files? And can you commit to their full release by the end of the year? Some of the victims were protesting that too many of them were redacted.
I know there are a lot of people that are angry about all of the pictures of other people, but I think it's terrible. Look, I like Bill Clinton. I've always gotten along with Bill Clinton. I've been nice to him. He's been nice to me. We've always gotten along. Respect him. I hate to see photos come out of him, but this is what the Democrats, mostly Democrats, and a couple of bad Republicans are asking for. So they're giving their photos of me too. Everybody was friendly with this guy, either friendly or not friendly. But he was around. He was all over Palm Beach and other places. The head of Harvard was his best friend, Larry Summers, and Bill Clinton was a friend of his. But everybody was. I actually threw him out of Mar-a-Lago, and as a person that was in Mar-a-Lago, I threw him out. This is Mar-a-Lago. It's the hottest place I think it's the hottest place in the world, but it's the hottest place in Florida. And everybody would come here. He'd come here. We actually threw him out. But no, I don't like the pictures of Bill Clinton being shown. I don't like the pictures of other people being shown. I think it's a terrible thing. I think Bill Clinton's a big boy. He can handle it. But you probably have pictures being exposed of other people that innocently met Jeffrey Epstein many years ago, and they're highly respected bankers and lawyers and others, and they'll end up, because of guys like Massie, who's a real lowlife, whose polls are down to about 9%, by the way, in the great state of Kentucky. If you look at Kentucky, Kentucky is such a great place, but I don't know, they've got a couple of people on there that are very strange in terms of leadership. But Massey's a loser, and he likes it, and that he works with the Democrats. He's just being used by the Democrats, because what this whole thing is with Epstein is a way of trying to deflect from the tremendous success that the Republican Party has. Like, for instance, today we're building the biggest ships in the world, most powerful ships in the world, and they're asking me questions about Jeffrey Epstein. I thought that was finished. I believe they gave over 100,000 pages of documents, and there is tremendous backlash. It's an interesting question, because a lot of people are very angry that pictures are being released of other people that really had nothing to do with Epstein, but they're in a picture with him because he was at a party, and you ruin a reputation of somebody. So a lot of people are very angry that this continues. A lot of Republicans are angry because of the fact that it's just used to deflect against a tremendous success.
I just want to do an update on the Epstein file release. A judge has ruled. Judge Paul A. Engelmeyer was told in a letter signed by U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton that he must reject a request this week by the congressional co-sponsors of the Epstein Files Transparency Act to appoint a neutral expert. U.S. Rep. Ro Khanna, California Democrat, and Representative Thomas Massie, a Kentucky Republican, say they have, quote, urgent and grave concerns about the slow release of only a small number of millions of documents that began last month. In the filing to the judge, they said they believed criminal violations have taken place in the release process. Clayton, though, said Khanna and Massie do not have standing with the court that would allow them to seek the extraordinary relief of the appointment of a special master and an independent. But here's the thing that I find crazy. The judge, Engelmeyer, lacks the authority to grant such a request, he said, particularly because the congressional representative who made the request are not parties to the criminal case that led to Maxwell's December 21. So, but they did admit that that the Department of Justice is committing a crime by not releasing this. So go ahead, take it where you would like.
Yeah, so the judge asked the DOJ and Ro Khanna and myself to respond to him, and we have until tomorrow to respond. So we're glad to see the DOJ's response. We have our own response prepared. You know, we never did claim in our letter that we had standing. This is an amici, which is a friend of the court, where we give our opinion. You know, congressmen often do this. They write in on certain cases. And it would be up to the judge, obviously, whether he wants to appoint the special master or not. We think it would best serve the victims in the case that he heard, which was the Maxwell case. And so the victims have standing, and they could get more closure. They would be better served. by a special master to oversee the release of these files. And so that's going to be, I think, the thrust of what we respond to Judge Engelmeyer with. And this ain't over yet. We have so many arrows in our quiver to compel the DOJ to follow the damn law. I mean, this is the problem you have. They say we don't have standing, and the problem is with the DOJ, they're the ones who are supposed to enforce the law. And if they're not enforcing the law, then you are kind of in a quandary, and that's why we're asking this judge to get involved.
So you even said that Pam Bondi should be called to testify in the House Judiciary Committee and the House Oversight Committee, where she must answer for her failure to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It's unusual that she's never appeared in front of the House. Why hasn't she?
Well, out of tradition or just the congressional job, our job is oversight. The AG always shows up at least once a year, or typically once a year, in front of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, Pam Bondi appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee, but conveniently, when she was supposed to appear before the House Judiciary Committee, of which I'm a member, there was a shutdown. And we could have kept having hearings, but Mike Johnson, some people think, in order to keep the 218th signer to the discharge petition that Ro Khanna and I were leading, to keep her from being sworn in, Mike Johnson said, well, there's a shutdown. You know what? Let's just close Congress down too. So we didn't have hearings during that period of time. So her hearing was punted, her schedule to appear. But I don't want to flip any conspiracy bits here tonight. But they scheduled her now for February 11th, I'm told, by the chairman of the committee, Jim Jordan. And I appreciate that, but there's a shutdown deadline looming on January 31st, or I believe it is. And if January has 31 days, I should know, I guess.
It doesn't.
Okay, and then it's January 30th.
Okay.
The only day I care about in January is the 13th. That's my birthday. But anyways, let's put it this way. On February 1st at 12:01 midnight, there could be a shutdown. And if that shutdown is prolonged through the 11th, she won't have to testify again. Hopefully she will testify, because I'm on that committee. I get to ask her questions for 5 minutes.
That would be fantastic. Just for the ridiculousness. I mean, I'm sure I get a lot of comedy clips out of that in 5 minutes. That'd be fantastic. But you also go on to talk about the Clintons. You say the Clintons think they're above the law, but they're not. They must comply with congressional subpoenas and appear before the House of Representatives or face arrest, conviction, and incarceration. I suspect they've observed Bondi's lack of resolve and have decided to test it. So you're trying to get them to, and so they're ignoring the subpoenas? Is that what's happening?
They're ignoring the subpoena. Now, that's the Oversight Committee. I served on that committee, I think, for 6 or 8 years. I'm no longer on it. That's Jamie Comer's the chairman, and he has compelled them in a bipartisan subpoena to come and testify. And I think what's going on here, Jimmy, is a negotiation. I think when push comes to shove, if Pam Bondi has the resolve to do what they did to Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, which is to arrest them for not showing up and testifying, I think they'll say, oh, okay. Oh, you really meant it? Well, yeah, we'll show up, but we want a cushy chair. We don't want to have to be there for more than 30 minutes. And, here's our favorite drink. We'd like that to be served. Like, they may try to extract, and this sometimes happens, some kind of special treatment to show up. I don't know. But I do think they will eventually show up, and they can do what everybody does that shows up that doesn't want to be there. They can plead the fifth. But here's the thing, Jimmy. Why not just release the damn files? If the Clintons are guilty, it'll be in the files, right? That's where the evidence is. If they were thinking about indicting Clintons, that'll be in the draft prosecutions and in the draft indictments and the prosecutorial notes. If one of the victims says that they got, sexually assaulted by Bill Clinton, that'll be in the 302 files, the forms that the FBI fills out after they interview the victims. All of those things I've just mentioned are things that Pam Bondi has on her desk that she hasn't even redacted and released yet. Those need to be released. And then that's where the facts are. You think Bill Clinton's going to show up and incriminate himself? I don't think so. It's not going to happen. So if people really, and by the way, I think when the Republicans are going after the Clintons and the Democrats are going after Trump, those are distractions. I think the folks in these files that were clients of Jeffrey Epstein are billionaires. I think they are, for the most part, apolitical people. Once you get to the Epstein class, you go to all the parties. They're not partisan parties, and you give to all the candidates in case one of them wins. So I think the real criminals here are not Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. I think we're going to find out it's some of these billionaires who really are out of the public eye. There may be scholarships named after them. They may have their names on buildings, and those may change once these files come out.
So how do we get some of those people in front of the committee? How come we haven't had like the Lex Westman called in front of a committee? Why, with the people we know who are involved, right? What is that going to happen, and why hasn't it happened?
Well, it should happen. And Jess Staley is one of the names that the victims gave to me that I read in front of Kash Patel to see if I could get any kind of reading there, because he said there was no evidence in the possession of the government that anybody but Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell mistreated people. And so that's when I said, well, that's interesting, because these survivors tell me they've given you all at least 20 names, and you wrote them down when they gave you the names. Have you looked at the 302 forms? And that's when Kash Patel admitted he himself has not looked at the 302 forms. And I'm like, well, then how can you sit here and say there's no evidence if you haven't even looked at the most obvious place to look for the evidence? That was in the hearing where he did show up. And I described the professions of these people, of 19 of the 20 people that the survivors tell me exist. Now, while we're here and we're talking about it, I get this question on the internet by trolls and paid accounts and whatever. They're like, you said you were going to release the 20 names that you have. You said you have 20 names. How come you haven't released them? Okay, the survivors said that they were compiling names, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and I offered that if they wanted to give us those names and they wanted us to read them on the floor of the House, we would do it. But here's the reason why we shouldn't do that. Number one, we got the law passed. It's now Pam Bondi's job to do it, right? It's not my job to go to the floor of the House and do this. That's a backup plan. But if you name the 20 people, then they can go through all these millions of pages of files they're going to release, and they can unredact those 20, but there may be 20 more that they never have to admit there are, because they know the ones you know, right? So this is our check. That list of people is our check on whether they have actually released the files properly, and all of the files. That's another reason you wouldn't want to go there. And then also, if you read the names on the floor, the other way that DOJ could play it is to say, oh, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And those people never get prosecuted. So it's Pam Bondi's. We won this fight. This was the largest uphill battle. That when you pass a bill that the Speaker of the House doesn't want passed, that the Majority Leader in the Senate doesn't want passed, that the President doesn't want passed, when you figure out a way to get that bill to the floor, and then you get a vote of 427 to 1 in the House and 100 to 0 in the Senate, and then you get Donald Trump to sign a bill that he said would have been a hostile act to even sign the discharge petition to bring the bill for a vote. I guess he committed a hostile act with his Sharpie to himself when he signed it. But when you get all that done, you've won. Like, it's literally, they have a law in front of them that they have to follow now.
So they're not following it. And I don't want to be a wet blanket, but I don't think we're ever going to see those files, because the people who actually pull the strings and run things don't want them. And the people who are the puppet masters of Congress and Donald Trump, right? So Donald Trump brags about being bought by Miriam Adelson and Sheldon Adelson, and that he does their bidding. He brags about it on camera. This isn't me. This isn't conjecture. This is him admitting it. And so he's completely owned by the Zionists. And so so to me, it's like that's what they're doing. They're trying to cover this up because it would expose the Mossad working with Jeffrey Epstein at the behest of Israel, and then they'd lose all that compromat that they have on everybody. They have all the blackmail on everyone, and it would all be worthless. And so just what is your? I mean, you did get this bill passed. It is law, but as we've seen, they can if there's nobody to enforce the law, then nothing happens. So what do you think is eventually going to happen?
When you're talking about the U.S. government, I don't think the blanket can be wet enough. So I don't blame you for being a wet blanket. Look, it's like the old Nintendo games where you beat the final boss, you beat Bowser at the castle, and they say, "Oh, the princess is in another castle. You got to do it all over again." And we've done that with subpoenas over the years and congressional testimonies, and they say, "I'm not prepared to answer that question today." And so finally, we did something that is unprecedented in the history of our country. We passed a law to compel them to release the files. Now, I would say this. The people who did Watergate and the people who did Iran-Contra, they thought they were never going to get caught either. And I think this ranks up there in history. When we look back on this, to Iran-Contra, I think you have properly identified the motivations of the rich and powerful people who do not want these files released. I think it implicates our own government, our own DOJ, our own CIA, just in many of the same ways that Iran-Contra did, or like Watergate implicated the president and the people surrounding him. I think it's on that order of magnitude. I do think we'll eventually get to the truth, and here's why. If Bill and Hillary Clinton, if they could outwait Jamie Comer, if they could get to January 3rd of next year, which is only about 11 months away, without ever coming in front of Congress, guess what? They can never be convicted for not appearing because that subpoena expires at the end of Congress. And if the Democrats take the majority, they're not going to reissue the subpoena. So the problem goes away, just like it did with Eric Holder and with numerous other people. The problem goes away at the end of every Congress. It does not go away with the Epstein Files, Transparency Act, because it's a law. Like, we didn't put an expiration date, like this bill expires on 2028. No, this bill is forever. And Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and the other people who are working on this for Pam Bondi, they are running afoul of the law right now. And I would like to remind them, this is not a subpoena. It doesn't expire at the end of Congress. You can't wait this out. And what could happen is the next attorney general could prosecute this attorney general.